So is this a fasting meeting?
Fasting?
Or they already eat?
I think they've already eaten.
You already had?
It was fast. Alright, so, yeah. So who knows what's significant about this week? Anybody know what's significant about Saturday? This Saturday. You have been gifted an entire extra day. You guys are clueless. It's hilarious. You have no idea what I'm talking about. It's leap day. This is leap year. Did you guys know that? Yeah. It's a full extra day in the year. A full extra day in February. Abby Brown's going to have her baby on the 29th. It's going to be hilarious. I didn't say it. Actually, my wife said it. So.
I know.
She said, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, it's the greatest.
it's
the greatest thing. They only age every 4 years.
You're 40 years old, you're still 10.
Yeah. Okay, so very funny. Just okay. I think it's funny, but so there is a. It was Valentine's Day, so we're kind of in that setting, right? So leap day. There's a tradition, you know, historically that people are going to get married. It's always the guy who asks the girl, right? That's usually how it works. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's generally how it works, right? Okay. So apparently, though, in some cultures, including the Irish culture, there is one day where that could be flipped, and it was leap day. If you had a bum who was just dragging his feet about not getting around to the whole proposal thing, you could kind of work things along and kind of ask him on leap day. So anyway, and supposedly the story is if the guy said no, you had to give her a glove. You know why? Because she didn't get a ring, and so to show that she didn't get a ring, she put a glove on, and then nobody would know she had gloves on, so they couldn't see if she had a ring on or not, you know, so that she wouldn't be bad.
Just one glove?
Well, actually, yeah, that would be bad, wouldn't it? It would be obvious. Anyway, so there's your historical trivia for the day. All right. So yes, it is leap year. Does anybody do anything fun because it's leap year? Anybody? So.
Wait, it's a Saturday?
It is a Saturday.
Sleep in.
Yeah, there you go. You can do whatever you want with that extra day. So we one of the things that we've had one leap day since we've been married, Fischer and I. So we 4 years ago we decided we would institute a couple of leap day traditions. So one of them is we play Twister. Everybody know what Twister is? The game where like you put one hand on red, you know.
Oh, I know what that game is, but I haven't played it.
Okay, so we take that game and we don't actually play it, so at least we haven't yet. But we take, and everybody does a handprint on one of the circles, and we mark it with the year. So the idea is, you know, 40 years from now, we're going to have a whole Twister mat full of handprints for everybody's handprint for the last year.
Like you gonna use paint?
Yeah, like, you know, like paint.
That's cool.
Yeah. It would be kind of hard if we just put our hand in there and it imprinted it would go away. But anyway. All right, so very good. Let's pray. Thanks, Lord, for the opportunity for the students to gather here and to just think about the things that they would like to accomplish and achieve in the year, and just pray you bless them and bless their time together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so who remembers the question I asked last month for you guys to think about? Anybody remember? Like, that was like last month, Mr. Fischer. I was like forever ago. Anybody remember? Wow, okay. All right, well, I remember, so lucky us. Okay, so I'll jog your memory. So I asked the question, what would you say to someone who said, Isaiah, I don't think there should be government. I think the whole idea of government is just ridiculous. I think it should be every man for himself, and I believe in anarchy, without maybe even saying that word. So, that was the question. Do you guys remember it now? Mr. Cox is like, I'm in the wrong place. He's talking about anarchy over there. All right. so does anybody remember that was the question? Yeah. Anybody give any more thought to it? Probably not. So, all right. So here's the interesting thing. The other significant thing about this year is 2020. So we have a couple things happening this year. The Olympics are happening this summer, so that's cool. We have a presidential election. You didn't notice at the end of the year. Maybe you did. Maybe you haven't noticed. But so it's very interesting because it's looking like, unless something changes over the next 5 or 10 days, the Democrats are going to put up a socialist as their candidate. So it's very interesting. Now, as a guy with a history in political theory and sciences, like really fascinating because we're getting all these really different perspectives on the spectrum. So Bernie Sanders is not an anarchist per se, okay, but he is a socialist, and I mean he said he's a socialist, so I'm not like putting words in his mouth. That's what he said, and credit to him, he's not hypocritical about that. He's openly a socialist, and he advocates for socialist ideas. So the reason I bring that up is what I might do is talk about, just real briefly, and the reason I'm even bringing this up is because you are a student council. You yourselves are actually a type of government, okay? And you are a representative government to some degree. Now, we're a little bit like the British system because, you know, Mr. Cox and I are kind of like monarchs and we can like dissolve the student council if we feel the need. But bottom line is you're generally deciding stuff based on representative government principles. So you certainly are not anarchists. You're not like, oh, let's just do whatever and, you know, we'll just figure it out as we go along. You're actually trying to come up with ideas. You have a process that you go through to implement those ideas, and you've already done that to some degree. Anyway, so I'm bringing it up because part of the reason for the student council is for you guys to already be thinking about some of these ideas and concepts, because these are things that are happening in the culture. And I bring up the presidential election right now as an example that people who are not much older than you, none of you are voting age yet. But you're not far from voting age. So Tim is. So you actually will get a vote in this election. So the point is that most of your peers, I don't remember the statistics, but it's not far from 50% think socialism is a good idea. Okay? So I'm bringing that out because it's very real that you're going to bump into people who are like, I don't understand why anybody has a problem with socialism. Okay? And you're likely to bump into people at some point who might even say, I don't understand why we even need government. Like, so as young people, and as especially Christian young people, you need to be thoughtful. You can't just be one of these knee-jerk, here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to bump into the socialists, or maybe they're not socialists, they're just a stupid millennial who doesn't know what socialism is. Okay? They're not stupid either. That's not usually the point. People are not stupid, they're usually uninformed. Okay? Who took my self-government class a couple years ago, last year? Right? Actually, that's right. All of you did. This is awesome. Okay, you remember what George Washington Carver said? He said, what's people's main problem? Hatred or ignorance? Ignorance. Right. Now, it isn't that there are some hateful people out there who are going to embrace hateful ideas no matter what. But most of the time, people are just totally uninformed. They've been told something. So in George Washington Carver's day, what was the lie that had been consistently stated over and over and over? What was the lie? What did he always keep bumping up against?
Race.
Right. People had been told, they had been told over and over and over that black people could not achieve the same kind of success and achievements that white people were. It was totally wrong. It was totally a lie. Right? But most people that he bumped into, they had been conditioned to think that way, and then they met George Washington Carver. They had never met a black person before. Or they had never met anybody who challenged that assertion and said, you don't even know me. You don't even understand what's going on here. And people like George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, and many other people challenged that false assertion and proved people wrong. And there were a lot of people who did change their perspective. Now, there are a lot of people who didn't, but there were a lot of people who did. People like Thomas Edison, people like Henry Ford, who were totally understanding, this isn't right, okay? Okay, so, let's go back. So the two questions is, someone comes up to you, Adia, Mercy, and says, I don't believe in government. What would you say to them? But here's what I don't want you to do. Oh, you're just stupid. Of course we need government. I mean, what would we do without government? We have nobody to pay taxes to. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so I don't want you to superficially respond to that person as if their argument is not worth listening to. Because if you do that, you've not addressed their issue. You've just simply sidelined them and have continued on your own way saying, well, I don't have to pay any attention to that person because it's such a ridiculous idea, I'm not even going to pay attention. That is the absolutely worst thing to do, because they'll just keep on getting more people on their train and have never had anybody confront them about their error or got them to think. And that's what we end up having, is a whole group of people who think a particular way because no one's ever actually challenged their viewpoint. But in order to give someone a challenge to their viewpoint, you actually have to engage with them and hear what their viewpoint is. Alright? So, you don't just blow them off. What would you say to them? Someone says, I don't think we need government. No gov.
Say the order would go down the drain.
And they say, it's okay. I can take care of myself. I've got a bazooka. Okay, so you ask the question, what about order, all right? Now, Tim, where would you get such a concept as that? Why in the world do we even care about order?
Without order, life can't really exist.
Now, did you hear what Tim just said? That is a deeply profound statement. You're like, it is? Oh yeah, it is. Because what Tim just said completely and entirely refutes an evolutionary idea of how the world goes. Okay? And at the same time, it also refutes an anarchist perspective. Because Tim has just pointed something out. If you don't have order, life can't exist. Okay? Now the funny thing is that, or actually it's not very funny, we live in an era right now where we actually have some anarchy going on. It's called moral anarchy. And we have the most confused generation, I think, in our country's history because we've entirely thrown out any kind of moral set of government principles. We can't even, here's how confused we are. We can't even realize that we have boys pretending to be girls competing against girls in girls' sports and winning. And we have people saying, oh, it's okay. Thankfully, we have some girls who are saying, no, it's not okay. But that's anarchy, okay? That's a moral anarchy. There's no rules, no principles, everything goes. Now, the thing about anarchy, so Tim, you just said order. Okay. Now, you've all taken my self-government class. What happens when order breaks down? Well, let's just follow the line. Let's think about historically what happens when order breaks down. What do we have? Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mrs. Webster. Appreciate that. That's very good. Okay, you guys are smart kids. Think about some things in history. Where has order broken down? Come on. Think about it. What happens in the big cities when the police stop policing areas?
Crime rate goes up.
Yeah, right? Okay? And what happens when the crime rate goes up? Are people interested in doing business?
Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of business, right? Right. Yeah, you know, sure. But do you have people wanting to do business? Do people go there? Is there any kind of productivity or activity that's going on that's contributing to the health of society? No. People start leaving those areas, right? Okay. Let's see. All of you are too young probably to remember Hurricane Katrina. I think you were all like 5. 2005. So you've heard about Hurricane Katrina? Okay, really bad hurricane hit the south, hit Louisiana. You guys know what happened in Louisiana? Because they got hit so hard, and because the government did not have the resources to respond immediately to what was going on, there was literally looting and disorder going on all over the place. And in fact, there was a concern, and actually I'm trying to remember, Yvonne, maybe you remember, I think they actually did have to declare some kind of martial law for a while. You know what that is? That's basically where all the norms are suspended, and the executive branch says, if we find anybody doing any kind of disorderly conduct, we can shoot them. Okay? Alright, so, follow the line. What happens when you have disorder? You have an unlivable situation, right? You have chaos, and what does that create? So order, disorder, leads to what? Okay, think about the French Revolution.
Corruption.
You guys don't remember about the French? You weren't born then. And of course, I was there, but Mr. Cox probably was there. So you guys remember the French Revolution? What was going on then? It's basically you got reduced to mob rule.
Yeah.
People were getting their heads cut off, literally. It started with the upper class. It started with royalty. It started with religious figures. However, as mobs are often accustomed to doing, they eventually worked all the way down to people on their own level who they didn't like anymore. You know, so there were leaders of the revolution who got beheaded because they weren't doing what the mob wanted to do. Okay? So that was France for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. Okay? So, but guess what happened? France didn't stay that way. Somebody finally said, you know, this isn't going to work. So guess who stepped in? A little man with a lot of power. You've heard of him, Napoleon. Yeah, guess what? Napoleon stepped in, took over, became an absolute dictator in France. Okay? So they kicked one monarch out. They got rid of the monarchy in France, and they had this wild, crazy time for a little while, and then Napoleon came in and said, you know, we've had enough of this. And he came in and set up a dictatorship. Okay? And that is what you say to your anarchist friend is, look, I understand you're fed up with government. I understand that there's a lot to criticize. I'm not a big fan of taxes. I'm not a big fan of regulation. But I am a big fan of order. And we live in a broken, fallen world. And here's the thing. I am not a libertarian. Now, I'm very sympathetic to libertarians. You guys know what a libertarian is? They're about 3 steps away from an anarchist, depending on where they are on the scale. A libertarian is basically someone who said, I think everybody ought to be able to do whatever they like, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Okay, that's kind of where they draw the line. Now, the discussion is, well, where does that level end? I mean, unfortunately, a lot of libertarians are pro-choice, they're pro-abortion, which is like, did you see any problems with that? Now, Christian libertarians, they understand the problem with that, and they are pro-life. But bottom line with a lot of problems with libertarians is that they presume that people usually are basically good, and that given the freedom, people will make choices that will benefit other people and won't hurt other people. But that doesn't bear out, does it? If given the choice, what does the Bible teach us? That men will always choose what? They'll always choose what's in their best interests. We're self-centered by nature. We're sinful by nature. We will always choose what is. So, if I'm hungry, or even if I'm not hungry, and I think I'd like that TV set, that didn't work out, did it? Okay, if I'm at the supermarket, and I have the means right here in my pocket to, bring home a little extra of cash, then I'll go ahead and do that because it serves me. It doesn't matter if it's wrong, I'll do it. Okay? And over in the Bible, if you go to the Judges, book of Judges, you have some really great examples of anarchy. The Bible says that everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And inevitably, that always led to them getting taken captive by a stronger authority or purpose who put them in slavery, and then a judge would come along and free them, and it'd all be great, and then they would all drift back into spiritual and ultimately moral anarchy again, and the process would go over and over and over. That is why anarchy doesn't work. Okay, it's the antithesis of self-government, because it doesn't recognize that there's a problem. Okay, so disorder, and then we could say like a strong man, or actually I would just say tyranny. Really, that's what it leads to, is tyranny. And that's what makes has made America so unique, is because we started with the premise of self-government. Remember that? Self-government is the premise that you can what? You can govern yourself, because you have an accountability to who? To God and to others. So anarchy doesn't work. The only way it would ever work is if everybody was perfect. Now, the truth of the matter is that there is never going to be an anarchy. Even heaven's not going to be an anarchy. And it probably could work there, but it won't even need to be. I mean, it's kind of pointless there. But when Jesus comes back, he's not setting up an anarchy where everybody can just do what they want. He's setting up a monarchy. It'll be the best monarchy there's ever been, because it will be perfect. But all right, so one more example, and then we'll move on to fun things like aquarium trips and stuff like that, right? Okay. All right, so you are doubtless going to bump into somebody, hopefully, well maybe not hopefully, who's going to vote for Bernie Sanders this year. Okay? All right? So here's what I want you to think about. Instead of rolling your eyes and shaking your head and saying, I don't know why you're voting for Bernie Sanders, try to understand why. And try to help them understand, okay, so let's talk about socialism. Okay, you guys know what socialism is? Somebody give me a good definition of socialism. Anybody want to take a whack at it?
Rich paying for the poor stuff.
That could be what it ends up working out to be, but that certainly isn't exactly what it. That's not quite it. So anybody else want to guess at the nuance? Okay. See, I'm asking these questions because here's the problem. You have all heard your parents or other people rail against socialism, right? Socialism is terrible, it's awful, etc., etc., etc. I just asked you what's socialism, and none of you can tell me what it is, okay? So here's your first step. What is it? Why is it so bad? Okay, you need to understand what it is, okay? So and let me tell you, your counterparts have been told that capitalism is bad. And I bet if I asked any of them, well, what do you think capitalism is? Oh, it's the rich exploiting the poor for all their golf games. It's like, no. No, that's actually not it. Okay, so socialism. Here's the definition of socialism, and here's the definition of capitalism. It comes down to this. You ready?
Yeah.
This word. Ownership. Okay? You with me? In a capitalist system, the individual owns. The individual owns their own property. Okay? Now, it is true, because of what we call the free market, that people are able to form businesses. And that's the primary actor in our system is a business, or what is often called the firm. But, and that can be small business, big business, little business, self-employed, but it means that the individual owns their property. And they can use their property as they want. Okay? Socialism, guess who owns everything? The state owns. That is socialism, where the state owns everything. Okay? Now, here is the argument from people like Bernie Sanders. They see capitalism as exploiting the poor. Alright? Because the poor don't have anything. Because the poor don't have as much property as the rich. Alright? Now, is there some truth to that? Yeah, I don't have as much money as Donald Trump, or Mike Bloomberg, or Bernie Sanders, actually, for that matter. Because Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. Okay? I don't have as many houses as he does. You guys don't have as much money as me. I don't know, maybe you don't. Actually, it wouldn't take much. I'm assuming probably not, because you're, teenagers and I'm an adult. But, okay, so yes, there is some truth there, isn't there? And is there exploit? You guys know what exploitation means? Jasmine, go ahead.
Ruining something?
Well,
Taking
it can lead to ruin, yes. It's basically when one person or entity takes advantage of someone or something for their own benefit. So, usually the way that it works is if, for instance, you're paying rent at your house, and your landlord, you pay rent to your landlord, right? Okay? So let's say that you are in this apartment and you don't have hardly any money, you're barely making ends meet, and you have a family that you're feeding, and there are things in your apartment that you would like to have fixed but they're not, and you keep on asking the landlord to do something about it and he doesn't do anything about it. Alright, and then as your lease comes up, he hikes the prices of your apartment, okay, to like really, really high prices that he knows are hard for you to pay. You will continue to pay those if you think that it's more secure, for at least you have somewhere to go if you don't have anywhere else to go, because it would be too unstable for your family and you're scared that if you decide to move, you may have to go somewhere else. And the landlord knows that, and he just keeps on soaking you for all you're worth. Okay? That's exploitation. Okay? It's wrong. And the Bible condemns it. And the Bible condemns rich people exploiting poor people. The Bible has very, very strong words for that. But don't confuse exploitation for a free market capitalist system, because guess what? What happens in this system? Where the state owns everything. What does that effectively mean? That effectively almost always works out this way. Socialists will always say that it means that everybody gets to live at a, equal measure of whatever, okay? But because of that little problem that we just talked about, why anarchy and libertarianism and all that other stuff works, is called what? Our sin nature. It doesn't ever work out that way. History tells us that socialism always ends up not with state ownership, but with a little group of people up here who control the state. They own everything. And everybody claims under socialism that you're going to have like this huge, big middle class, that everybody's, happy, and, we're all eating at Applebee's on Saturdays, and, no one ever has to make the choice between eating at McDonald's and eating at, McCormick and Schmidt's. We're all eating at Applebee's, and it's all great, because it's all equal. But that's not how it works. Instead, you have a very, 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 very elite class up here, and you have everybody else down there. Okay? Because human nature exploits. And that top group of people who are sitting cozy at the top are not real interested in making sure that everybody is doing wonderful at the bottom. In this system, there are flaws, to be sure. But you know why they're flaws? Because human nature is flawed. And in a capitalist system, yeah, there has to be guards against what we call crony capitalism, where basically when few people get to the top, and we've dealt with this in our country, they're called monopolies, where people are allowed to have a market corner on the market and they can exploit for their own things, and there's time where it's necessary for the government to come in and say, okay, you know, we need to put an end to this. But, and you can have that discussion, but generally speaking, why capitalism works is because in order to survive in a capitalist society, what do you have to do? You have to be mindful of other people's needs. You can't come up with a product that nobody wants or needs. You have to connect with other people. You have to know what they want. The nature of the system encourages you to actually want to know what is it that people want and try to bring them a product or a service that's good quality, because people are smart, generally speaking, when it comes to this. You don't go and buy the worst thing unless you absolutely have to. I was in the airport on Sunday night, or Monday night, flying home from back northwest, and I was considering getting myself some earbuds. You know what? I decided, you know what? This airport, they've all monopolized on the earbuds. They've all agreed to sell earbuds for the exact same price in every one of those little shops. And I said, no, I'm not going to pay 20 bucks for earbuds when I know we can get them for like 5 or 10 on Amazon. Okay? That's capitalism. Now, if I had wanted to go spend that money, I could have. But anyway, the bottom line is that in this system, even though it's flawed, it still gives people freedom. Okay? In socialism, you do not have freedom. You get your own little box, and your own little thing, and your own little whatever, and everything usually ends up being really mediocre and crummy, because the state has no incentive to make it any better. Okay? And you don't believe me? This is what happened in the Soviet Union. This is what happened in China. This is what is going on in North Korea. Okay? Those are all socialist countries. And, by the way, this is what happened in Nazi Germany. Did you guys know that the Nazis and the communists are really actually from the same tree? You're going to hear people say that communists are on the far left and Nazis are on the far right. It's really not true. The only thing they disagree on is how the government regulates things. Socialism, the state owns everything directly. In the Nazis' system, the government didn't technically own anything. They just regulated everything. So they just told all the businesses what they could or couldn't do. It was effectively the same thing. They basically owned the businesses. They just, it's kind of like, Tim, if I said, oh, Tim, I don't own your car, but you can't drive over 30, and you can only shop at Shell for gas, and you must put tires on your cars every 3 weeks, and don't go up the mountain in the winter because, and if you do any of that, Tim, taking your car away. Okay? That's just a different variety of socialism. Okay, so when you have the discussion with the Bernie Sanders voter, and they're all fired up because Bernie's going to bring us free health care and free college and free lawnmowers and free Corvettes, and I don't know what else he's going to promise us. I mean, he's promised us, The simple question that you need to ask is, well, who's going to pay for all this? And most of the time, those people will say something like this: oh, the rich will pay for it. And you say, well, hold on a minute. That's actually not how a socialist society works. The rich actually don't pay for it. We're all equalized. And if you take people who actually, you're depending on their money to pay for all these things, and you actually bring them down, then how do you think any of these things are going to happen? We're not going to get rid of our debt. There's not going to be free college. There's not going to be free health care. There's going to be crummy health care. There's going to be crummy everything, at least historically speaking. All right, so you have that discussion, and you always go back to some of these basic principles. So I have a cousin who was a libertarian, and he said he stopped being a libertarian because people's nature are so bad. And now he's a socialist, because he feels like socialism will help solve that problem. Because it will put, I guess, some really good people at the top, making sure that all the bad people are, kept in check. But it's an interesting thing. So, all right, there's your civics lesson for today. Thank you for listening. All right, Chastity. The floor is yours.
Just, you know, I haven't been here so.
Okay. Just gonna talk fast.
Okay, so, we talked last time about doing the Baltimore Aquarium field trip. And as far as I know, is that what we're thinking of for the senior class trip? Is that, or did you still want to do the one to either the Wilds or River Valley?
Can you give them the specifics of what it is you found out?
Yes. Okay, I sent an email out, but I need to get your all's email because I didn't have your email and I couldn't email you about it. So basically, it is $39.95 per person in our age group. The dates I'm thinking of are March 21st or 28th. I was gonna go on that today. Do you guys have any preferences right off? Like, oh, I can't do one of these dates. Do you know? Do you know? Okay. So it's roughly $40 per person. We'd get there around 9 when they first open. Local people can, or not local people, but people local to this area can carpool together. People local to Baltimore can meet us there. They don't allow food in there, so we'd have to eat in one of the restaurants there.
They do have outdoor like places where you can sit and eat. So I mean, it would not be difficult to bring lunches. We've done that.
Okay.
And you can go in and out of the aquarium, like those that stamp your hand.
Okay.
I mean, and what are the dates? When did you say?
21st or 28th
Of
March.
March? Yeah, so it's very, very likely that I'll be available to help chauffeur. I can even go get people's lunches and
Okay.
just so you know all that.
Nice. Okay, that's something we can talk about too. So those are the details. It would be a one-day thing, like 9 to whenever we feel like leaving or whenever we decide on later. But do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, do you want this to be the trip or do you want?
Well, no, I thought it was just a field trip.
Right.
And then I don't really know what the other seniors, what they want to do for their class trip.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I think you're the only senior that's participating. So, if you want to do something or you don't want to do something, it's really like you have a lot to say in it. And so, would you be interested in the Wilds? Do you still want to look into that? Yeah. Okay. So we can look into that too. But let's just get about like how many people are going to definitely be able to do the. Actually, no. Which dates would work best? The 21st or the 28th? Do you guys? No? Okay.
either one's good for us.
Do you? Oh. Okay. So I'm gonna check. Then let's plan for the 21st because that's right before the next workshop, and that would be just, we could do that before the next workshop. So does that sound good to everyone? 21st. We meet at the aquarium at 9 a.m. when they first open their doors. I can look into different tours we could do, or if they have special things we can do as a group. I'll look into that. And if you guys have participated in the fundraisers, then student council funds will cover you and your tickets. So let's plan on that then. One thing that was brought up, and this is like I'm thinking in terms of next fundraiser we'll do, which is at the expo. Mrs. Cox, my Aunt Valerie, Prudence, and Josh's mom, suggested doing a flower sale at next expo for Mother's Day because Mother's Day follows closely to that. and we have a greenhouse down the road from us, and we're good friends with them, so we could get them a really good price, I'm sure. So does that sound good to you? You can advertise that for Mother's Day. And then let's plan on doing a candy sale at Expo like we did last time.
Jesse, are you talking about expo or workshop?
Expo. And then, yeah, and then last time we did a candy sale. I don't know how many things we have for the silent auction because we definitely don't have as many as last year. But we're still gonna look into that and see. And I think we can, yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the fundraisers. Just because there aren't a lot of funds, so we don't need to do a lot of work. I mean, there aren't a lot of necessary, so we don't have to do a lot to raise the money. So, and you have suggestions on other things we can do, or anything like that, fundraisers or events that you wanted to look into, or whatnot. Where's Mr. Joel?
I think he's in the kitchen.
He's not. I'll get in touch with them about the senior class trip. Do you know how many seniors are in your class?
I have no clue. I think, yeah, I don't want to say because I don't know.
Okay. So I guess we'll get specifics about that. And can you give me your email address right now? The one that you want.
You just want to pick
Sure.
You. Good. What class are you doing?
Okay. Yeah. Y'all are dismissed.